right, get ready to laugh, maybe pee your pants, learn so much, understand what PR actually is. But today we are joined by one of my dearest friends, the Queen, the woman who runs circles around me with energy, marketing, branding, messaging, and is an absolute gem in my life. We have my friend Heidi Anderson on the podcast today. And when I mean she is a prized possession, I mean there is no one better in this world to talk about PR, what it means, how to use it, how to get more visibility for your brand, how to live in your truth, how to be an example, how to have breakthroughs. And we covered everything. And plus she has a pink background and literally just drives the podcast because it's Heidi and I'd let her do that all day. We talk about how vulnerability and owning your story are powerful tools in PR, how building relationships and connections is the key, what that looks like and how to actually do it when it comes to PR, how using catchy headlines and personal touches can make your pitches stand out to get you noticed, to get attention, especially in this crowded world, how to avoid the common mistakes in PR, such as not being memorable or burying important information, how to put your accomplishments and accolades at the top of your pitch to showcase your expertise. And by the way, PR is not just getting featured in magazines or on news. This is when it comes to podcasts, getting speaking engagements, connecting with people, adding value to other people's communities. Like we cover it all and it's applicable to all of it. How to be memorable and don't be afraid to share your street cred, and how vulnerability and authenticity are powerful in PR and help build relationships. And when you listen to the stories that she shares and the case studies that she shares, I promise you'll leave with inspiration and a boatload of ideas to take action on. So Heidi, I love you. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for being here. For everybody listening, without further ado, let's get into the episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. And the only way I know how to welcome today's guest is to genuinely say, this is my sister from another mister. I don't know why that just popped into my head, but you know, most people think I'm like pretty extreme and pretty intense. And then this lovely queen that I love with every ounce of my heart makes my volume knob look like it's a 1 and makes me feel like a pansy most of the time. And that's why I love her. And that's why we're friends. And that's why she's an absolute savage in so many ways. And I mean, in so many ways, from being the queen of radio to literally being the only person that I would ever mention PR around because of how crappy it's done in the world and how amazing she is, to every ounce of value, what she stands for as a mother, as a partner, as an entrepreneur, exudes confidence and belief in people, loves everybody to the end of the world, is pink as pink can be, literally calls me out of my crap all the time. But really what she's doing is calling me forward and calling me up with everybody else to really own themselves, own their story, own their power, and be unapologetic about it. And so that is the only way I know how to introduce the Queen, Heidi. So Heidi, welcome to the show.
You're making me cry, George, all the way in Australia. I'm like, oh, it's 4 a.m. in the morning and I've got the tears going.
I know, just so everybody knows, I made Heidi get up at 4 a.m. I did. Yeah, I made her get up at 4 a.m. because Heidi has had me do group calls with her people at like 1 a.m. my time.
And then they were so high energy that George couldn't sleep. It was like he was at a rave back when you were 19. Oh, no, I honestly, it's like my breakfast radio days, and no one will get me out of bed these days at 4 a.m. This is an absolute honor to be with you today. It's been like, I've been listening to your podcast for years and years and years. And so to be on it, I'm like, let's do this.
Yes. And I don't know why, but I think it's perfect we waited till now because there's always a good reason, because you were just incredible. And just so anybody knows, she's the first person I call. I'm like, I can't figure this out. I need help. Help me. Blah, blah, blah. Like she's who I call, and she just straight owns it and does it. And so like genuinely one of the dearest people that I love to pieces. She's just all the way on the other side of the world. And so we'll get her in Montana, and we'll get me in Australia soon, since everybody's begging for me to come. So there's a time. There's a time.
I know. I can't wait. Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. Like, who wouldn't have you with a bedazzled background like that? That happens to be my favorite color.
I know, right? Like, I don't have any shoes on. I don't have any pink shoes on, but I've got the pink background.
See, it's funny that you just said I don't have shoes. Knowing you, I expect you to say I don't have any pants on. And I'm like, that is so normal for you.
I actually put pants on today for you. They're tracksuit pants because it's 4 a.m. Had it have been lunchtime, there would have been no pants here in Australia.
Yeah. Well, so speaking about no pants, this is something I asked you before the show, and I genuinely appreciate how much you force me to take my own advice. but you are like the queen of vulnerability, owning your story, and it is genuinely like the number one secret for your success at like the deepest part of your
Mm.
core, and the way you do it and what you've accomplished with it, I feel like is a prescription slip and a permission slip for people to like take no more time and wait no longer except for today to go. And I would love for you to share it.
Yeah, well, I think that's what I became famous for on our breakfast radio show here in 2016. I opened up about my anxiety live on radio. It went viral all around the world because, you know, I was the bubbly, outgoing, confident girl. And then all of a sudden, I dropped on air that I wasn't as confident as everyone thought, that I was scared shitless, that I was really sitting in the darkest, you know, pain for 6 weeks, and everyone was like, what, huh, how did this happen? Like we didn't see this. And then I shared it live on the radio, they recorded it and it went viral, and I got inundated with thousands and thousands of messages. You know, for someone who was so scared to be seen, I was seen that day. And so that was one of those true moments that I realized, oh wow, just talking about how we feel and opening up, and I now call it like shedding your shit, is one of the most powerful and greatest things that you can do for yourself. So after that, like I said, I had 1,000+ messages. I wrote back to every single person. And, you know, for me, I was like, I didn't realize how disconnected I was. And all these people were feeling this around the world. Like I had messages from Sweden, America, you know, like all places around the world saying like, I didn't know that my sister was feeling this way. I didn't know my daughter was feeling this way. And the way I described anxiety and what I was going through. So I became quite famous for being honest, which is wild, isn't it? Like,
Yep.
like the fact that everyone was like, oh, she's just being honest, but that's what I became famous for. And I'm like, well, what else are people famous for? And that was because radio was such a entertaining place where they were telling jokes, or, you know, there was comedians and that on air. And so that kind of continued until I hung my headphones up. But these days, that's my gift, you know, and that's how I do PR as well, uncovering people's vulnerability and getting them to share it in a really beautiful way.
I can vouch for that all day, including when you stretch my fabric. You're like, I think you should do it this way. I'm like, oh, that tickles just enough that I know you're right. And I love you to pieces. And how novel of a concept in the world that we live in, that being honest and vulnerable is the biggest breakthrough in strategy and tactic ever. Like, hello,
Yeah.
mind blowing and simple at the same time.
Yeah. Like, honestly, you could do it today. And this is the thing. It's like, you could do it today on social media, and there is a whole, you know, I guess a whole movement of people doing that. I think for most people, the biggest challenge is being vulnerable with the people they love, right? And like the people that are close to them.
Mhm.
And so I always, you know, whenever I start, you know, working with someone, the very first thing, even all of my, you know, live shows that I do, I always encourage people. The very first thing I say is like, do you have the courage to tell your loved ones or your close friends how you're truly feeling? Because sometimes it's much easier to share on the internet than it is to tell, you know, your family and friends. And so I always encourage people to, you know, maybe shed your shit with a family member first, and, you know, have the courage to open up.
I love it. I love it. Well, one of the, and this is, I'm just excited for you to riff on this one because I love you for this, but one of the ways you get people to shed their crap, because I gave up cussing, by the way, like I'm really
Oh,
doing
yes. Oh, my
good. So
God.
it's
I
really
forgot that
hard,
you.
but I,
That's well, this is going to be really hard for you because I'm
yeah,
like Captain Swear over here in Australia.
no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm genuinely, it's how I work out, but it's really funny how interesting it is. My mouth won't even say them anymore. But
Yeah.
in shedding and these beliefs in these stories, right? I'm gonna
Yep.
say shedding your stories for now. You
Yep.
you
Love
call it
that.
the poop, because the poop, shedding your poop doesn't alliterate like shedding your, shite.
It
Um,
doesn't.
but one of the things, and I laugh with you about this all the time, is like your basically workout for exposure therapy, which I think is one of the most
Mm.
powerful practices that's neglected. Like I've read 100 of books on it and I try to talk about it, but genuinely, like I love that. Like, I won't talk to you for a couple weeks. I'll pop on social and I'll see you in a bra and underwear on national news, or with a group of 30 women running through downtown in their panties, or going into the scariest place that you could go. So can you like unpack that
Yes.
from where that supports you, but also the lens of like authenticity?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I had that moment on breakfast radio, which became my shed your shit moment. So I always get people to start with being vulnerable. And then I always say the second biggest thing, which is really part of the first thing, is exposure therapy or exposure activity. And for me, that changed the game, George. Like that day, exposing myself to people's, judgment, what they were going to say about me, like them truly seeing me. I was like, wow, shit. Like, I've exposed myself, but I feel lighter, even though like a lot of people would think
Yeah.
that you would feel worse. And so for someone who'd battled body image issues their whole entire life, I was like, well, how can this help me, like exposing myself in that way? So I started off, and like, it can be this simple. I started off just wearing a bikini around the household, because now you'll see me on national TV in my bra and undies or a bikini or walking through shopping centers. But I literally started in the home, and I would start with like looking in the mirror, and then I would hear the voices, I would hear all the stories. And I was like, okay, right, take the bikini off today, not ready for that. And it took me 3 years. And then I ended up at a beach here in Perth, and then I started getting photos. And then this became really natural to me. So natural that I was sitting there one day and I was like, what's going to scare the shit out of me these days? And I looked at a bunch of girls that I was coaching at the time, and they're like, well, going to the beach in your bra and undies, or, is scary enough. And I was like, no, we need to next level this exposure up, because this is safe for me now, And they were like, oh, do a nude shoot. And I'm like, no. And I need to actually walk through a shopping center in my bra and undies. And some of these women, they were being coached by me, so they weren't ready for that. But they were like, we'll come with you, Heidi. We'll do this with you, because they believed in me. They believed in what I was seeing and feeling, and they wanted to be a part of this energy. And so we ended up walking through a shopping center in our bra and undies. Honestly, the doors opened. I have never felt so fucking petrified. But as soon as I walked through, it was literally like I was Cindy Crawford on the catwalk, and all these women, like everything fell away. People were cheering, we were getting high fives. Like, honestly, it was one of the greatest feelings in the world. And when we got back to the room, we all kind of talked about some of our shit that came up, and everyone couldn't believe how accepting 98% of people were. I'm sure there were some people that were judging us, but we didn't know that. We focused on the positive, and that moment truly changed my life. I got called up by a documentary after that. I got, and so that's how I've ended up on TV now. That's my thing, and a lot of people are like, oh, but do you need to get into your bra and undies to build confidence, to tackle that anxiety? And I was like, well, no, but how can you expose yourself to the things that you're scared of? And I kind of look at it like with the clothes, it's like the stories, you know what I mean? And the shit that we carry, and the beliefs and years of all that hate. Like when you take the clothes off, it's like shedding a layer. And so how can you do that in your life that might be not walking through a shopping center? And that's how I get kind of people to start thinking about it, because when I take those clothes off, I am vulnerable. I am like truly seen. You see the scar on my stomach from when I had a C-section. You see the dimples maybe on my legs, and they're the things that I was so scared of people seeing before. Whereas now I'm owning them. I own who I truly am, and I'm not going to let your judgment bother me, and I'm not going to let society's expectations define me. And so that's kind of how I bring exposure therapy in, through, I guess, using my body and taking off my clothes.
Well, like it's like, to even tie it in, it's really a required ingredient if you want PR or your business or your brand to grow, because you have to take a stand for something. And when you do, people are going to attack you. They're going to attack your beliefs, and you have to be conditioned for that. Like I don't know
Yeah.
if I've talked about this, but like, I wrote a New York Times bestselling cookbook, and I'm literally on book tour while actively being bulimic and lying to everybody
Mm.
about being a paleo food blogger and taking care of myself, hiding in plain sight. And I'll never forget the day where my ex-wife was like, are you really going to go give this talk and lie again? And I knew exactly what she meant. And I was like, I'm going to walk out in front of all my peers and I'm going to tell them everything. And I swear from hotel room to stage, my t-shirt went from dry to drenched. And then I stood up
Yeah.
there and I was like, I've been lying to all of you. I'm still bulimic. I still struggle with this. And I had every fear imaginable. They're going to
Yeah.
leave. I'm going to lose my contract. I'm going to get fired. But the opposite happened. People that
Mm.
were standing up sat down. People that were on their phones put them down. And I didn't even know what to say. I basically crucified myself in my lies and all of that in front of them. And then I was like, okay. And they're like, well, are you going to give your talk now? And I'm like, what? I don't remember my talk now. Like, I thought I was like done. And then I had a whole different discomfort. I'm like, oh, I actually get to talk now. And I'll never forget the feeling though. Like the
Mm.
feeling was absolute freedom. Like
Yes.
releasing that weight, it was like 1,000 pounds was gone. And it's interesting now, even hearing you say this, because that was 10 years ago. But
Mm.
now it's like so many people tell me, they're like, dude, did you really just come keynote in a pink jumpsuit? And I'm like, yeah, it was comfortable. Like what? Like you wouldn't do that, right? But
Yeah.
it's such a powerful place and it's so simple too, but it feels like it. I remember the feeling viscerally. Like it
Yeah.
felt like I was taking my life.
Oh, I felt exactly the same when I spoke out on breakfast radio, which was twice that I actually spoke out. The first time was about body image, the second time was about anxiety, and that exact same feeling. It's like literally this could be the end for me. Like, but then
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of freedom, that feeling of like taking that backpack off with all the heavy rocks in it that you've been carrying around and then putting it down and going, I don't have to carry that anymore. And,
Mm-hmm.
people, like I said, being seen was like what I think really validated the honesty for me of like, wow, I actually have been a bit fake, like,
Yeah.
wearing that fake mask. And that's in itself, like, looking in the mirror and going like, fuck, I thought that I was an honest person, but I wasn't. So yeah, I remember that feeling so like like you said as well. And do you know what it is about feeling though, isn't it? And this is what we forget: the PR, the marketing that I do, the live shows that I now do here in Australia. It's all about creating a feeling. And when we walked through that shopping center that day, it was a feeling for us. It was a feeling for, the people who were in there. Then when we went on the SBS documentary and we did another huge walk here with hundreds of people, it's all about a feeling. And I think that's what we forget. And so many people say to me, well, Heidi, what's the fucking secret? And I always say to them, every day I envision that woman who walks through the shopping center. Every day I bring up that feeling when I'm scared to post on social media, when I'm scared to go for something. I think about the feeling that I'm going to have, or the feeling of that girl walking through the shopping center who doesn't give a fuck what people think. And that's how I have now lived my life, because people want to know. They're like, what's the magic pill, Heidi? How do you have all this confidence and courage? And I'm like, over time, it's been visualization of that feeling of that woman walking through the shopping center, and also 1% changes, those small changes that I make every single day to, become that woman.
Yeah. I'm in. So before we tie these together, because there
Yes.
is so much nugget and foundations underneath that to PR, one of the things I love about you is like, I even like, even the term PR for so long, like, I was like, ugh,
Yeah.
right? Until I met you. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, no, this is what it's supposed to be. But for like everybody listening, can you like kind of define
Mm.
PR in
Mhm.
Heidi terms?
Yeah, well, the reason why I got into PR, I'll tell you that quickly. The reason why I got into PR is because that these movements and everything, I was like, these are supposed to be shared. And I had a PR degree, I was working in radio. But like you, I hated when I worked in London. I was like, PR. Ugh. And then that's why I got into breakfast radio. It didn't feel authentic. It felt really yuck. And when I decided to leave radio and I was doing all these amazing things and I wanted to share them with the world, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to start PRing these, but how can I look at it in a way that I love, that's authentic, with, honest like stories that we're sharing in the media, not all those bullshit ones. And so I was like, oh, public relations is what PR stands for. And then I was like, oh, but to me, it's about relationships, And so I teach everyone now public relations equals public relationships, which is obviously why you love it, because that's everything, your whole entire ethos and brand as well. So, you know, and when you think of it like that, people are like, okay, but how? And it's like, well, you're building a relationship with the journalist. You're building a relationship with the person who's reading the paper on the other side, or watching the TV show where I'm standing in my bra and undies, and building a relationship with, you know, just anything to do with PR and relationships is like, oh, what am I trying to fucking say here? I'm getting on my high horse of like PR equals relationships, but I'm like, whoa. So PR, I call it like the power of public relationships. And if you put yourself in an arena, like, you know, TV, radio, newspapers, every part of that for you to build your brand will begin with a relationship. So that's how I kind of came up with the whole tagline, relationships, public relationships.
I love it. And like and since we're in this bucket of like tying it in, also just for everybody to catch, I loved, and I'm not going to let this one go, but I was going to wait to open or close this loop. But you're like, oh yeah. And then when I got all those thousands of messages and DMs, I responded to every one. And I'm like, oh, you think it's an accident that you got those connections or that those people came into your program, right? Like you
Yeah.
also embody it too, which is why you're my sister from another mister and I love you to pieces.
Yes. Yeah.
But really, I love the way that you define it as public relationships, because even when you came into the Alliance, well, I mean, you're in the Alliance, but when you came in and you were teaching it and talking about it, right? Like so many people look at these things transactionally, like, oh, I need them to do this for me, or I need them just to post this here. But you have to build relationships with people so that they want to be a part of it and it's mutually beneficial. And I love that part because it really is how you go about getting the things done.
Yeah. And, you know, you always talk about it too, George, like there's a heartbeat on the other side. And I think we forget that. And I think for so long, it's like if you pay an agency like, you know, 5 to 10K to 15K, sometimes even more per month for a retainer, they're not so much thinking about the heartbeat on the other end when they're trying to sell a story in. They're thinking about, oh, I've got to get this person PR. I'll send it to as many people as I can. I'm really intentional with it, especially the people that I work closely with. Same with my stuff. I'm putting myself out there in my bra and undies. Like I've got to be intentional who the hosts are that I want to, you know, share my story with. So I think that's what you have to remember. It all comes down to relationships. And I think a lot of people, like we have a lot of coaches that have incredible like missions and they want to create huge impact in the world, but they have no idea how to share their story. They're really good at fucking teaching. They're awesome at teaching, you know, changing people's lives, but we have to uncover their vulnerability. And that's the part that we want to share. It's like from heart to heart, what do you want to share? Not thinking about how many people you can get in your coaching program, etc. You know, or, you know, and I love this, but like all the ego side, which is like, I want to get on more stages, which is so me as well. But it's like, well, what is the actual mission, you know, underneath there, like heart to heart that we can share with the person on the other side? And that all starts with a relationship. Like it's sometimes you got to date the journalist, you know what I mean? And you might get rejected, but that's okay. Then you say, okay, well, at least I got a response. They've rejected me. How can I take this relationship from rejection to a possibility or an opportunity? And that's how I always think as well.
Yeah, this is why I love you. I love you to pieces so much. I'm like, come out, tell me no, and I'm just gonna love you deeper, and I'm gonna make that no a yes. Like we'll figure it out. Like I'll do
Yeah.
whatever it's gonna take. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, you know,
like it's
It's how I've created so much of my stuff, George, is through rejection. Honestly, like I've just created these live shows here in Australia. I started them off in Perth. They're part of PR. They're part of me sharing my story, my vulnerability. I also get women to come up and they share 7 minutes of a moment, a lesson, etc. in their lives. And that whole thing started from rejection. Now, this is a huge PR branding part of my mission, but it started when I went to one of my old managers and I said, do you want to do this show? I want to take it on the road. And she was like, I don't want to work with you anymore. Like after I'd left radio. And I was like, cried, raged, did all the things. And I was like, why can't I do that on my own? And I turned it into something, you know, just the other week, one of my clients, we didn't hear back 2 emails we sent with her incredible story. And, you know, I get so excited when people share their stories. I'm like, yes, the world needs to hear this. We've got it. And then crickets, or, you know, you get a rejection. But this lady, we got twice we followed up, nothing. The third one, she's like, oh, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And I was like, no, we're going to send one more. the journalist came back instantly and was like, oh my God, I love this story. Sorry, my inbox has been flooded. Must have missed the other two. And it's like, I think, going back to the stories that we carry around with us, they then stop us from connecting and building relationships and pitching ourselves and promoting ourselves and putting ourselves out there, because we get in our head instead of, like, as you talk about, like leading with relationships, leading with our heart, and, thinking about a connection and intentionally, putting inspired action into place.
Yep. I'm a big fan. So I don't normally ask people to do this, but I know you can do this. And one of the things that I love is you said this a minute ago, and you're like, I like helping them turn their vulnerability into a story, but also like they sell their programs and they're good at this. And I love when you riff on like examples of ways that you do this, like how you send subject lines to people or like what headlines you read. Like I never forget the one where like the Sun picked it up and all of that. Like, can you break down a few of those?
Yeah.
Because I feel like no one in the world is better at this than you.
Okay, I think I have this superpower. It was like yesterday, we're on a call with my inner PR club, and the girls, I just got them to pitch themselves to me, like we did role play. And I will see headlines and, think of it like this. You walk into a news agency, what magazines do you see? What newspapers do you see? What titles are they using? And because I've consumed so much media, it's like, why will you press play on this podcast today? Because you see the headline, right? You see the hooks. So if you're pitching to someone in the media, whether it's TV, radio, a collaboration, a speaking gig, a TEDx talk, even your book, if you want to do a book, to use that for your own PR, you want to hook them in with the headline and the angle. And the biggest issue that I see, especially with coaches, and I love you for this, and because I'm the same and I'm a work in progress, is we have 58,000 things to say. And, we go on a podcast like George's and we're like, oh my God, I've got 58,000 things to say. I need everyone to like hear this. And what happens is we miss those moments of vulnerability or that one specific topic that we should speak about. So one of my clients, Aston, she is an incredible relationship coach. And this is the one that I talked about in the Alliance.
Oh, I love this one. I'm so glad you're sharing this one.
I just went through her Instagram. We were having a one-on-one, and I just went through her Instagram and I was like, what's her philosophy? Like, what's she sharing that can pop out? And she was talking about how she would have a 5-minute coffee with her husband in the morning, and after children, that saved her. Like, that saved their relationship. Like they were heading to D-Town, to divorce town. And so when I saw that, I was like, bang, that is the headline. We send this in December, because most people divorce in January. Crazy stats here in Australia. I don't know if it's the same in America, but most people divorce in January. I know this from my breakfast radio host days, not because I've looked into divorce myself, but from my breakfast radio host days. We had to know stats like this and stories and everything. And so I was like, the 5-minute coffee hack that saved me from divorce. So the journalist who was sitting there in December, who was run off her feet, most of her friends, that in the office space had gone on holidays. She's looking for a title right there and then that is going to be like, bang, this is relevant for right now. And so with Aston, this was her philosophy. And so we just shared her hack in there and it went viral. That's one that you saw over in America. It went viral in the UK, here in Australia. She had thousands of leads overnight, people just sliding into her DMs for her to, for people wanting to know how can they work with her. So it wasn't her saying like, this is the coaching program I've got, this is the service I've got. It was her philosophy. It was her extreme vulnerability, to say, hey, I've got 2 kids. Me and my husband, actually, we're going to get divorced, but having a coffee a day saved our marriage. Straight away, people could connect with her. But also why this was so powerful is because everyone can do that for 5 minutes a day, right? Like every single person in the world, and majority of people, if you've got children, you're struggling after having children. Like, that's the honest truth. Like, not enough people talk about this because we don't have those big, hard conversations before we get married. And so she was like, that connection time over coffee in the morning. So it was really simple for readers and listeners to be like, hey, I can just pick up a cup of coffee and, save my marriage. And so it went viral. And overnight she had the thousands of leads. And it's stuff like that that you want to really hook them in. So for me, I am a bit cheeky, right? Because that's my personality. And I've worked in the media. I do have contacts, but I will play around with if I know. So one of my mates just recently, well, we're friends now. We weren't originally. I sent him a message, George. I don't know if this is too crude, but I sent him a message and
Nope.
I said, he's gay. I know he puts it all out there on his Instagram, and he's an awesome journalist in Sydney. And I just sent him a message and I said, I promise it's not a dick pic. Please open. So straight away he was intrigued. There was curiosity, like, has this girl just sent me what I think she sent me? And then, there was me like this with my thumb up, like, yeah. And then we started a relationship. So I sometimes will send messages and, I won't use the headline like what you would see in the newspaper. I'm a little bit cheeky. And the reason why I do that is I want them to see my playfulness. And when I share all my pitch templates and share all the things that worked, I always want to remind people to, comes back to being themselves, being honest, being authentic, because that's what journalists are also looking for as well, especially if you're going on TV or radio. They want to see that you have a personality, and that doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert out there like Heidi Anderson, but they want to see that you've got that something. So there's two ways to do it. Use the headline, that you'll see, like the clickbaity. And I know that might be like, oh, I don't know if I like clickbait, but use that, or play into your personality, stalk the person out on their Instagram, find out what they're into, and can you hook them in with something like that instead? So yeah, that's how I like to do my PR.
Yeah, and I would say make it memorable because it stands out, and it's true. Like I I think naturally, and even tying this to what you said earlier, like when you know who you are and you're authentic and you've kind of exposed yourself to like, so what, they're going to judge me. What's the worst that happens? They say no. It kind of gives you a permission slip to really expose your personality. And that really
Yeah.
is the secret. That's what makes people feel safe and resonate with you. And holy moly. And so I want to ask you this, and it's kind of it's the same vein, but a different question, because it's really easy, to hear all of these things. But I think also, like, what do you see as some of the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to PR? Like when they're trying to pitch or they're trying to get people that like just are the common traps. Because I even remember back in my cookbook days, like the only best things that I got were because I'm like, no, I'm going to do it different than everybody else. Like, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it this way. And you end up as like in people's shuffle deck of like next, next, next. Right. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when it comes to like trying to grow their brand or using PR?
Oh my God, I've got so many things to say. Like you said, no one wants to be average,
I'm
right?
going to shut up. Go. Yeah.
No one wants to feel average. No one wants to be average. And that's what happens. Like, so coming from my breakfast radio host days, if anyone emailed me, this is the honest truth, and you wanted to be on our radio show, delete, delete, delete. I didn't have time to read emails. That's the truth. Like, I was too busy, reading content over here and this and living my life as a breakfast radio host. That's what I had to do. But if anyone ever sent me anything in the post that stood out, every single thing that was delivered to me through the post, I would open, would read if it was a pitch or whatever, and then I would call the person. So that people got to know that about me. And then they started sliding into my DMs, sending little videos, sending that kind of stuff. So, as much as I can hand out all my free pitch templates and this and that, which some people love because they love structure, the biggest mistakes I see is that you're not standing out and being memorable, like you said, in your pitches. So I'm going to use an example of one of my clients just the other day. She's a florist. She had this incredible story about like wedding tax here in Australia, and she wanted to debunk all the myths. And so I was like, well, send the journalist a bunch of flowers, like that's your thing. And then say, please check your email. And then they get these flowers, like, who's this from? Oh, I've got to check this email. That's how you stand out, and one of the ways that I actually got my breakfast radio job was because all these people had applied for it, and I sent one of my thongs. That's not a G-string, by the way, like one of my shoes, my thongs here in Australia. And I sent it to the radio station and I said, I've got one shoe in the door, or one thong in the door. Can't wait to get my next one in there. And, you know, that for someone who was a breakfast radio host, they were like, well, that's thinking outside the box. That's standing out. That's being memorable. They're not going to remember everyone who sent their applications through on email. They're going to remember the girl who sent the thong, the shoe, remember, not the G-string. And so I want people to think like that. So it's the same as like if I give you my pitch templates and I give it to all my clients, all the ones that have worked, you'll see we don't bury the gold throughout the email either. And this is a big thing that we see people do is like at the start, they too much waffle, too much. Like you've got to think these journalists, majority of them don't have much time and they're digging through so many emails, you know, pictures, etc. So you need it at the top. You need the gold at the top. So that's why I always say like the clickbaity headline. And then you also want your expertise. Don't bury your expertise. Like I got to interview Kim Kardashian, you know, when I was working in breakfast radio, Robbie Williams. Like I got street cred for interviewing some of the biggest names in the world. So when I'm pitching myself, I need to bring up my breakfast radio host career to the top, not save it down the bottom with my banner, you know, like on the thank you at the bottom. So I think a lot of people, we bury like the headline and the gold, and we forget about our street cred. You know, it's not like, what do they say? It's more like who it's not what you know, it's who you know. No, that's not right. It's like, you know, the things that you've accumulated along the way, your accolades, your CV, all the things sometimes that we're too scared to share because we don't want to seem up ourselves. We need to put that at the top. So there's some of the things that I see. So just to recap that, so if anyone's listening that's like, right, I'm writing this down, Heidi Anderson, be memorable. Like don't let them forget who you are, even if it's just a photo in the email, you know, like straight away it's going to be different to other people. Don't bury the gold. So make sure the headlines at the top really hook them in. And then also share your street cred. Don't forget to share your street cred, like, because that is like going to give you that expertise, it's your accolades, like I said. And especially here in Australia, there's this whole thing called tall poppy syndrome, where a lot of people get beaten down for putting themselves out there and speaking high of themselves. I don't know what it's like in America. And so a lot of people are so scared to spruik their accolades. So, but that's the stuff, especially if I'm pitching for TV, that I've done Big Brother. Yep, I was a Big Brother housemate, kicked out day 43. I've interviewed some of the biggest names in the world. I've got a breakfast radio host career. I've got a PR degree. That's the shit that, do you know what I mean? But maybe I'd just choose one of those, like just workshopping this. Maybe I'd just choose one of those depending on the angle that I was going for, that I would really hit them in the face with. So that's what you want to do. And maybe also one final thing is a few dot points at the start. Like that's how it's going to stand out as well. Like make it easy for them to say yes. Make it easy for them to send a response. And then the final thing, because like I said, once you get me going, I can't stop, is in the very first pitch, we don't have to give everything away. Like curiosity, hook them in. Like that's what happens in the newspaper when you see the headline, or listening to this podcast. It's like, you know, when you get an email, right? Well, George would know this with email marketing. When you get an email, you look at the headline and you're like, oh, if it piques curiosity, you're going to open it. That's the same with them, okay? So when you're pitching, you're not giving them everything. You just want to give them a reason to say, oh, yes, and then respond, and then that's how the relationship starts.
So this I have to share, and I'm so glad you said thong in the door. And so for everybody else, post is the male, and thong is the sandal. Okay, so I'm gonna translate Heidi Anderson to U.S. people and all my Australia people, since so many people in Perth listen to this too. But you get this already. But one of my dear friends, Alex McMahon, was my copywriter for a while. When he moved to Denver, he wanted to like rewrite copy for a lot of the local businesses. So he went on Amazon and bought a bag of like small rubber feet. and then just
Yeah.
rewrote each of their flyers and then put the rubber foot in the envelopes and dropped it off. Said, well, since my foot's already in the door, I did the hardest part for you. It's rewritten and I'd like you to use this. And if you ever need help in the future, just reach out and let me know. And it was genius, like
Yes.
absolutely genius. And then, you know, I think too, and what I love about PR, like I even think about PR in the lens of every single person that you connect with, right? Like every potential
Mm.
lead, every potential client, every
Yes.
potential journalist, because one of the things that I've done forever, which I didn't use as a strategy, was more so a safety net for me. But like, I go to conferences, I go speak, I go keynote, and then everyone's like, I want to connect, I want to connect. I'm like, give me a business card, I hate business cards. Like they drive
Yeah.
me bonkers. And so what I would do is I'd be like, oh my God, just give me your phone and I'll put my number in it. And then I would take their phone and I would record a video of us together on their phone and I would text it
Love
to
that.
myself and I'd be like, oh my God, Heidi, it was so good to meet you at X and X conference. And I'm so glad we talked about this. And don't forget to follow up so I can send this to you. But here's my actual number. See me and you standing together right here and blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And then I'd hand them their phone back. But then on my side, if they didn't reach out to me for like 3 months, the moment they texted me, I had a video reminding me of who I met, why I met them, where we met. And
So
then
good.
who else does that? And they're like, everybody would follow up. Right. And so, like, in the lens of like, be memorable, make sure that you stand out, like, be willing to be yourself. And even in the
Mm-hmm.
lens of like, when I do quote unquote business cards, I don't have business cards. I have pink poker chips that say your most valuable liability. That's what my card says. It's a pink
That's
poker chip.
so good.
And so when people come up and they're like, oh, I'd love to connect, I have two of them. I have one in my right pocket and one in my left pocket. And the one in my right pocket has a QR code on it and it goes to a calendar link for the team. The one in my left pocket has my phone number on it. So depending on who they are, I pick my hand in a different pocket and I give them a poker chip. And I still have people send me those. And they're like, dude, I've been playing with this thing for like 3 years. Like every time I play with it, I think about you. And it's just like these little subtleties that
Yes.
you get to match your personality that help you stand out. So I wanted to share those because like you got my brain tickled like crazy.
Oh, I love that. But that's the thing. And I think people forget that with PR. And I think is what I was trying to say earlier is it encompasses every part of your life. And I think for so long we've just seen PR as like, oh, PRing a book or a keynote talk or TV, radio, just that traditional stuff. But when you think about it, it encompasses that whole thing. So when you're out, at a keynote and you're pulling out your chips, like that's PRing yourself. Like that's people are remembering that because it comes back to the relationships. And I think that's where a lot of people forget that they can bring their personality out in that. And for me, like that's been a whole game changer, even just on my, on my social media. Like I became famous for the girl in the red bikini or a bra and undies. So in my photos that I have on my website, like I'm in my bra and undies, even though I'm talking about PR with a pink phone, And so it's stuff like that people are instantly. So whenever people see bras and undies, they're like, whenever they're getting dressed in the morning, they're thinking about me. So it actually taps into your subconscious as well. And I think that's what people like don't realize. It's like having those moments, like, people are thinking about you 3 years later. So like, I love that so much. And that's my big thing. And another thing that I'll say there with speaking into, your subconscious and stuff like that is one thing that people always go like, well, why should I PR myself? I'll hire a business coach, non-negotiable. I'll hire a Instagram coach, but why would I need to PR? And there's a real thing that I think people forget, and it's the buyer's psychology, right? Is that if you have shared your street cred, and that might be the podcast that I'm on here with George today, like this is going to be huge street cred for me here in Australia. Like I always have talked up about how big George's podcast is in the US and I love him and I love being in his world. Now I get to put that on my Instagram. So some of those people who are sitting there who might not be ready to buy from me yet, they don't even know it. But me posting my post here with George, today is that instant street cred. Oh, Heidi knows her shit. She's talking about it on a podcast in the US. And so they don't even, I think they don't even know that. And people, when you've read stuff on biopsychology and think about it like that, like people don't think that PR should be a top priority. And I'm like, oh, it's so important. It's one of those top things that we should be doing in our business. But I think so many people haven't done it because of the bad rap that it's been it's being given. So I want you to remember that's the real importance with street cred as well. Not that I need to tell you that, you know that, George, but it's like so important for everyone else.
Well, it's a good reminder, right? Like it's never really knowing it. I mean, even I forget that like PR isn't just like getting pitched to be on radio or getting pitched to be on news. It's really the consistency and congruency of your brand, and then really like doing even the same rules that you talked about, like make it memorable, put the gold at the front, and don't
Yeah.
apologize for what you've accomplished, because even in the lens of marketing, those are the things that people remember, which give them the confidence or permission slip to be able to pursue it. And then to add marketing into this, like really the foot through the door, the pink color, the pink poker chip, all of those are social triggers, right? Like they
Yes.
create subconscious associations. Like I'll share another one. Like I didn't set out to make my brand with a lighthouse. I set out because my mission statement for my personal life was to stand with structure in the face of resistance to create possibility. And like 3 years later, my brother was like, so basically a lighthouse? And I'm like, oh yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's like a lighthouse. But now, like, and you'll be able to riff on this all day, but like people think I'm joking. And it's not, because every time somebody sees a lighthouse or I reference it, they remember it. But normally about 10 to 15 times a week, I get texted, messaged, or emailed photos of lighthouses all around the world. And my favorite one was a couple of weeks ago. This one was like, George, I was driving down the highway with my husband and I saw this lighthouse. So then I put on your podcast and I made him listen to it. Now he loves it. And right, like that
So
person in the
good.
driver's seat, like this entrepreneur's woman's husband is not a
Yeah.
potential client of mine, or nor did I think he would listen, but she saw a lighthouse, remembered the association, put on the podcast, then he became a fan and he's in our world. And so PR for me, and what
Mm.
I thank you for so deeply, is expanding my understanding of it outside of just like the transactional world of like, oh, I'm pitching a reporter, I want to be on the Today
Yes.
Show, or whatever these things are. And
Yeah.
so I think for everybody listening, it's not just like, oh, I want to grow my brand, or now I just want to get featured here. Like the traditional PR that most people are used to is also a byproduct of applying all these same principles into our day to day, into our marketing,
Yes.
into our messaging, all those
Yeah.
pieces.
Oh, yeah. And you know how much I loved your lighthouse. And I think it's so brilliant. And I even said to you, we need to have a party at a lighthouse. That's what we need to do. Or we need to have like a boat party and like end up at a lighthouse. Like that's what we need to have when your next retreat, George, is not in, an Airbnb. We're hiring a lighthouse, mate. But it's stuff like that I think is so simple, but it's missed. So yeah, and that's like I love that about you, and that was one
Truth
of
be
the first
told,
things.
I look at real estate and I get notified every time a lighthouse comes up for sale. And
Of course you do.
I found a lighthouse and I was like, okay, so I can't fit everybody here, but I can do a VIP event. And I was like, Ash, goals in the future, like this is
Yes.
happening. But it really, really is just also the intentionality of like understanding, like, and even for me, and I'd actually love your thoughts on this.
Mm.
I think I fell victim to this for so long and not even applying it to marketing, but we know in communication, like only 7% of communication is verbal. The rest of it
Yes.
is like audio and visual and referencing and emotions and things
Hmm.
like that. So where in the lens of like PR from your brain, or marketing and branding from your brain, do people lose because all they focus on is like just the text? Like how do you see that?
Yeah, well, I think it's like that's the thing that we kind of talked about. It comes down to energy as well, and like like we said, those social triggers and understanding that, and also I think like thinking about that from the broader perspective of like if you are pitching to someone who's a journalist who writes for a newspaper, then they are probably just going to want text, right? That's the truth, because that's how
Yep.
they know. Then someone for TV, like one of my good friends, he's the weatherman here in Australia on Channel 7. He's the sunrise weatherman, travels all around Australia. Where he finds most of his content is in his Instagram DMs. People send him videos. So, you know what I mean? It's like understanding also the journalist as well, and like how they're going to consume what you put out there. I find it so interesting when you say that, because the number one thing people message me about is my energy, and they're like, we want your energy. And I'm like, I wonder if they even heard what I said, or they just got my energy. And I'm like trying to think of ways how I can sell my energy now. But I think like don't get caught up in perfecting the text. Like that's the honest truth. There's a time and place for copy and writing. And, especially in the US, online publication contributions to, say, a body and soul magazine or something over there in the US where you read it like, yeah, okay, you're going to get, that's pretty much how you're going to consume it, the writing. But if you're on TV, how can you be memorable in your presentation with what you say, not with just what you say, but like your energy? George would be wearing his pink shoes. I would be wearing my bikini. Like, what is your thing, and not forgetting those things. Another thing, when you're on TV as well is just taking your time, like if you're being interviewed, and like there's all little things like that, the stage presence and everything that happens as well, space. There's so many things that go into it. So I hope that answered your question.
It did. It did answer my question. So I'm gonna open this one up, right? So,
Okay, yeah.
what is something that you want to share that we've missed, or that like you're desiring or so passionate about sharing that like I haven't hit or haven't asked in the lens of PR, or anything that you have?
That's a tough one because I feel like I always just trust that whatever's supposed to come out is supposed to come out. Like I always do my little prayer before I ever speak into anything. And I think for me, do you know what? I think what I will share is, you would have heard me at times today, like stumble through some of my philosophy or talking. And, I used to, when I worked in breakfast radio, I was scared to, say honestly, like, oh my God, I forgot my train of thought, or like, I forgot where I was. Whereas now I'll just stop and be like, what was I saying? And, just the other day when I was emceeing a gig, like I've completely, like my brain froze. And I've made a career out of being a professional broadcaster. And I think why so many people hold themselves back is for that reason. They're so worried about being perfect. They're worried that they say too much, that they'll freeze on stage. They'll do all of these things when in fact we're human. And I think that I just want to remind people of that. Like I got up at 4 a.m. this morning. Of course my brain's not going to be firing like it is at 10 a.m. Do you know what I mean? And so we have to give ourselves grace in those kind of things. But I think that's where we hold ourselves back from all of the things that I've seen with even some of my girls. Just this week, we're pitching to some really big places in the PR club. A couple of them have done incredible mindset work, like they're mindset teachers and coaches, but their shit comes up, and their shit has come up. And one of them was like, shit, I didn't realize like how perfect I was trying to get this, or how pedantic I'm trying to be. And in that process of her trying to be perfect and be pedantic, she's lost herself, and the authenticity isn't coming out, and she's not being truly open and honest with, some of her philosophies and everything. So I think I really want to share that, acknowledging that we're not perfect. We don't have to be, and don't let that hold you back, because, some of the greatest like human moments on, that have gone viral is because, like we only spoke about this at dinner the other night, is because you see a human element and they're not perfect, like a politician fucking up, or, something happened that's like, oh my God, that was actually hilarious. I can't believe that happened. They posted that lady and she didn't have pants on when she was doing that Zoom on the news, like stuff like that we try and hide, hide our mistakes, hide our, I know for me, pedanticness and perfection held me back for such a long time. And I was so scared to say the wrong thing or freeze. And now I just go, hey, that's me. My brain, just because I go 100 miles an hour, sometimes I forget what I'm saying because I've left my thoughts like way back, a kilometer back, which is miles for you, by the way. So yeah, I think probably just to recap
I know
that.
I live with European clients. I know. I feel like we should all just be on the metric system just to make it easier. So,
Right.
yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. It's confusing, but also like I just want to say one thing to what you said, like just to even vouch for it more. It's typically in my experience those moments of catching yourself that lead to the vulnerability, and it's also exposure training, and it's also flexing, and it's building confidence, because it really is a muscle. Like it's a rep. Like
Yes.
having you on the show and knowing we're friends and I can call you anytime, you so effortlessly do things that even I struggle with. And I forget on my side that like the amount of hours I've put into like customer journey or making videos, or like I've sent literally hundreds of thousands of videos in my career. So if you're like, George, I need a 60-second video, I don't even need a timer anymore. It will come out at 59 seconds. But I was like, do
Yes.
you know how many fumbles and roadblocks or been in offices with CEOs and like, wait, I just said that. Holy moly, please don't shoot me. I didn't mean that. Hold on. What I meant to say is blank, right? And it's just staying in the game. And even earlier when you were talking about like the rejection, right? Like just not accepting it and being like, okay, let's reinvent. How can I do this? But there's so much depth at so many levels underneath even how you talk about PR in the lens of like embodiment and your confidence and your vulnerability. And all of these things are so universally applicable to everywhere. Like, so what if your Instagram story didn't work? Take the same idea and repackage it again to see if it lands different. Or so what that
Yeah.
nobody clicked on that post, right? Do another one. And like just keep the ball rolling. And I feel like that's like one of the biggest secrets, because I would love your thoughts on this too as we near the end of this. But like, there's no finish line in PR either. Like you're only as strong in PR as your willingness to keep that energy going and keep your gas pedal down, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I always say action equals confidence. And so it's like you go to the gym, exactly like what you said. You go to the gym, and what do? I want to build muscle. So every day I go to the gym. I choose however many times. So it's like, well, I want to build that confidence to be on camera so I can nail that 60-second pitch. I want to be, more confident on podcasts. Cool. Well, actually, are you pitching yourself to podcasts? Are you jumping on podcasts? Are you even doing lives on your Instagram? It's like we say we want all these things, but we're missing that important step, which is the action. And so we will only get results if we take action, and we will only build confidence through courage. And through courage, we take, the action, and then it all falls into place. So for me, that's been a massive part of who I've become, why I've become the person I am, how I teach PR. And it all falls into, like, starting with the girl on breakfast radio who was so scared to be seen, but was on breakfast radio, like, go figure. And then, was finally seen and opened up. And then it was like every day from there, I took action. And that's how I built my confidence. And then that's how I teach people, the confidence element comes into PR as well. And so, yeah, I think so many people will sit here and will say the thing, and then it's like, but they don't take the next step, that inspired action. The only way you're going to get published is if you pitch, and you will get rejected. That is the honest truth. You will be rejected, and you'll like, just the other week, here's a story for you to wrap this up. I sent 50 plus emails, 50 plus for different clients, and one who was on a book tour. We got 3 responses. One of them was the national TV show here in Australia for the breakfast show. So the best of the best, and that's like a 20K spot, for breakfast TV. And so who cares about the rest? But people will focus on, the ones that they didn't get, or they didn't get a response for this, and then they start to take it personally, and then they won't continue to take that inspired action. So yeah, you've just got to remember, this is how I think of it. Action equals confidence.
I love that. And the bow I'm going to put on that is it's the same everywhere, right? This isn't just a PR thing. This is in your
Yeah.
habits, your rituals, your routines, your emails, your videos, your courses, your marketing, right? Like it really, really, inspired actions come up so many times on the podcast today. I had a friend on earlier. I did another one. But really,
Yeah.
it's staying in that action, because it's also how you learn, and it's how you went from the girl on the radio show to the girl, on the beach, to walking through shopping
Yep.
malls, to doing what you do now, to being the queen that you are. And, like we have to write the chapters of that book. And at some point, you have to put pen to paper and just be willing to write the pages. And if you get to a
Yeah.
page you don't like, you're like, well, I'm going to white that thing out and not do that one again. But it's the fastest way to learn. And I
Yeah.
just love, like, I love you to pieces because you're my homegirl, but I also love how much depth there is underneath the way that you DPR, because it is fully embodied and fully aligned. And it really ties all the way back to the beginning of the show, which is your story and your authenticity and your willingness to flex that muscle and expose it more frequently is what's going to build this confidence by taking inspired action, which is going to create the possibilities and catalysts to elicit these emotions so people can feel themselves in it and feel called to reach out, called to have you on shows, called to have you on podcasts. And you just have to be willing to knock on the doors and knock on all of them.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and I think that's what we were so afraid to do, is to expose ourselves. And so, that's why exposure therapy and exposure activity is such a big thing that I teach in PR. It's why I've started my shows. Like, I want to have a big arena show. Well, I've got to start somewhere. So I'll expose myself and start with, my small shows of 50 intimates, in the theater that I do now. And it's like, that's an inspired action. The only way I'm going to get confidence for the big thing is by doing the small thing first and taking the first step. So I just think that's how everyone can start. And that inspired action might be sending, a DM to or a message to one of your family members today, like how we started the show, and, and actually say, hey, this is how I'm truly feeling, or this is what's truly going on for me at the moment. Like, maybe you can start there today.
Yeah. So I'm gonna wrap the show differently than I ever have before. But so first, if all of you listening cannot understand why you need to surround yourself with Heidi and her energy, then I don't know why you listen to this podcast. Okay, I love you, but I'm going to be really blunt about it, because this woman is one of my favorite women and she's a dear friend. So listen, her Instagram is _ Heidi Anderson. It's also behind her if you're watching this on video, but it's Heidi Anderson, spelled like Anderson. But I'm going to ask you this. If you could have everybody listening DM you anything, what would you have them DM you to connect with you on Instagram? Like a pitch try, something they want to share that they're vulnerable with. Like, do you want them to practice with you? A picture of their thong, or them in their bra and underwear on the beach? Like, what do you want them to send, Heidi? Because I want you to make them flex this muscle.
Joke Heidi wants to be like, can you all send me photos of you on the toilet? Like toilet selfies?
Do it. I invite, I celebrate every one of you.
Okay, so for those who send me a toilet selfie, you get like 10 marks. I'll follow you back. No, I think it's like the being vulnerable. And then the people who send this one, you only get 5 marks. We'll start the relationship. No, I think it's just reach out to me, send me a DM with what you're afraid of. And I think do you know what I mean? Like what is the thing that scares the shit out of you? And then I'm going to send you a message back, and I'm going to create a challenge for you, a personal challenge for you to complete within 24 hours. Okay. So I just want you to send me a message of what you're afraid of. And then I'll respond back with a actual challenge for you, and I'll personally message you all back. So, I'm ready.
I love it. I told you all she was like my sister from another mister. I'm not joking. She is the same level of savagery, because I promise you, and just so you know, when you take that inspired action, when you stand in that story, when you face that fear, it's where magic in life starts to make sense. And I could give you 100 moments in my life, and being on stage and sharing that story wasn't even one of the big ones. I remember, and just to give you a permission slip, I hadn't spoken to my biological mother in 15 years. And I was in a personal development course. And you want to know what they did on night 1 after the introductions? They're like, they interview you and they're like, all right, cool. You're going to go on a 1-hour break and we're going to give you the assignment. And if you don't do it, you're not allowed back in the room. And my assignment was at 1 a.m. That time, her time, was to call my biological mother for the first time in 15 years.
Wow.
And until I spoke to her, they wouldn't let me back in the room. And so when you get into the personal development world, you can get really, really stretchy. So I promise you, sending Heidi a DM of what you're afraid about is probably the easiest, most chunk downable nugget of how to own your story, how to start with this exposure therapy, but really start to unapologetically be yourself, because your story is the only thing that gives somebody else a permission slip to start writing their own. And in the world that we live in, if people don't know what you stand for, they don't know what you believe in, and they can't feel why you believe it, you don't have a hope of doing business. And so this applies absolutely everywhere. And so I invite you to take that challenge and don't send me any toilet pics unless you really want to, but I will razz you on the internet and figure out another way. You might get a picture of me in a pink thong or something as a way to come back, and I'll
Well,
launch.
I was going to say as well, if you want to send me a photo in your bra and undies, if that's scary for you as well, like I'm here for that, because I always think of it like Tony Robbins. He gets people to walk on fire, right? What I get people to do is to like get down into their swimmers or their bra and undies. The same thing happens. You can do anything once you start to face your fears. So send me your personal, messages of what you're afraid of, and I'm going to tailor that challenge for you, because I promise you will go like shit within 24 hours. Your life will start to change. You might want to PR yourself to, to a TV show after that. You might want to go jump off a plane, like, out of a plane with a parachute, of course. But, you're like, you'll be like, oh my God, I'm ready to take on the world.
Yeah. And how I'll land this is that the only way you'll win is if you take the step first, because Heidi can't
Yeah.
take the step for you. I can't take the step for you. And just so you know, I'm not numb or immune to this either, because Heidi also calls me out on my crap. And she's like, really, George? Really? Really? You think you're going to hide behind the podcast and coaching people on this and not do it? And that's why I love her to pieces, because she walks the talk and she lives it and she embodies it. And so this might be one of those episodes, especially with all the golden boulders that she dropped in this thing on you shedding your shite and all the different pieces from PR to making it memorable to leading. She is a absolute gem of a resource and lives by this every day and helps so many people do this. And I just highly recommend that you put yourself in her ecosystem and in her world, because she's everywhere in my world too. And I'm not letting her leave, because she knows I'll hunt her down. Like, you don't get to get rid of me. And so whether it's her sending me selfies on the beach or videos of here, she's like, George, just so you know, I haven't showered today. I'm sitting here topless, but it's so good to see. I'm like, I love you. Like, I just love how unapologetic of you are. And it really is a very fresh reminder and a breath of fresh air. And just so you know the impact you have on everybody but myself included. Like, you inspire me. You love me so deeply. You genuinely help me by just being an incredible woman and seeing me and being my friend. And I just know how magical you are. And I appreciate you from the top of my heart.
Thank you. I feel the same, and absolutely honored that I've got to be on the Mind of George podcast, because this is literally my favorite podcast ever. So, through COVID, I spent many days with you, George, like just walking up and down the beach, just listening to George. And then that's, how I sent you a message and I'm like, now he's my friend.
Yeah.
Inspired action.
You're stuck with me, and my best friends and best clients live up the street from you in Perth, along with like a lot of other people. So it'll be coming soon. It'll be coming soon. So
Yay.
For everybody listening, we'll have her link in the show notes, but it's really, really easy. _ Heidi Anderson. Or if you want the easy way, go to people I follow and just search for Heidi. She's in there too. Or send me a DM and I'll send you her profile. And then I'll remind you to tell her what you're afraid of, so that you can face that fear and really start to own it. So Heidi, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here.
Thanks, George. I love you, mate.
I love you too. So for everybody listening, this has been another episode of The Mind of George. So not only do I belong in a straitjacket, but so do some of my dearest friends, which is why we only share the safest parts with you. Because if you heard our behind the scenes conversation, you can't really cancel us, because we've canceled ourselves, but we'd be pretty canceled, because this is what it's really, really like. And so no matter what happens, just remember that any inspired action you take is a good action. Take it bite by bite. And remember, relationships will always beat algorithms, especially the one with yourself. So we'll either see you in the next episode or hear me in your earballs. But either way, we're out.